Hello again, this is Carol King, the developer of Custom Home Builder Solutions, also known as CHS. This video is a continuation of a video I was doing about the various things about your vendors or trades or suppliers that you set up for people that you pay in CHS. The previous video was about the vendor's setup list and various tools there for searching and then doing various labels, etc. Also, mostly it was about the various ways that you can communicate with the vendors from the vendors list. Previously, we showed various other tools on the vendors list. In this particular video, I am going to talk some more about how you can search the vendors list for various things and produce some good reports of your various vendors. So let's get started by doing vendors setup and info, and then vendors list and setup. And here's our list of vendors. We've gone over, like I said, all sorts of things about how to change the vendor code, delete vendors, move duplicate vendors that you might have set up into the same vendor, communicating through comments. And in our very first video in this playlist, we already went over vendor expirations, vendor documents that you can upload. I'm going to click the help button. And you can see the very first video in our playlist is about controlling those trades and suppliers. And then I'm talking about how you can request certificates, W-9s, this and that, how you can control their workers' comp and their expirations, and how you should pay attention to how you set up your various vendors to make use of these very handy tools. So please don't miss that very first video about tools that you can use for that from the vendors list. I'm going to start off by giving you a little tip, and we'll start talking about how to search for things. Let's go ahead and say that we just want to see all the active vendors only and not ones that are marked with an I for inactive. So as soon as I do active, you'll see all safe security disappear. So I'm doing active. Let's do our very first report, and then I'll give you a tip. Our very first report up is based on search results. So in this case, we searched only for active. So we're going to get a big full report of vendor contacts information. You can see that they have the name, the address, contact email, mobile 1, mobile 2, that kind of thing here. But you might start looking through this list and saying, you know, there's a bunch of these that are actually inactive. We haven't paid them for 2 or 3 years. And I don't want them to show up on a report like this. So this is the tip that I'm going to give you. I'm going to go ahead and use this vendor expirations list, because on that list it shows you the last date they were paid. Now I've gone all over this about how we're looking for expirations, etc. But this has the last date that these vendors were paid, and this is active vendors only. So maybe there's a whole bunch of these that you paid a long time ago, and in our demos we've been doing them since 2013, etc. We've done a whole bunch that in a way that are current in 2015 and 2016, even though I'm doing this in 2021. But doing a demo is kind of weird because I'm not really a builder's office. So this is the tip I want to give you. Let's search. We'll give no from date and the last paid date, but we'll give, let's just search for everybody that has a last paid date before 12/31/2013. And let's search for those. Now we have apparently 14 of those. And now we're in 2021 and we haven't paid them anything since then. So maybe we'd like to get these off of our active vendors list. So you can do a little results report here that is just showing that last paid date and the various vendors. So if you print it out, send it to PDF and print it out, you could take that list, and let's say the first one is fashion glass. Say you print it out and you have it in your hand. Then you could take that list, go to the F's here, and see fashion glass, and edit it. And then you could go ahead and set its status to inactive. In other words, you don't want this one to be showing up anymore with your active vendors. And I'll save that and close that. And you'll see now that it has an I for inactive in it. Let's filter to active. Let's do our second report. And you can see in the filters down here that it says vendor status A, and that if we get somewhere around those fashion, whatever it was, There's fast sign. These are in alphabetical order by the vendor code, but you can see it goes from an E to a fast sign, and we don't have that fashion one in there anymore. But this is a more extended report that also includes the notes that you may have made about the vendor. Up here I think we can see some notes. Here's some notes that were typed in the notes box on the vendor setup screen. And you can see any additional contacts that you have set up. In not only the initial main contact, but additional contacts that you've set up for the vendor. So that's kind of a handy report based on your search. This one is a good one to send to Excel. So let's take a look at it. It's done in a legal size landscape. But if you send it to Excel, let's get to the top of the report, you can see how everything is in one line, so that if you export it to Excel for whatever reason that you're needing to do that, you'll get a big thing. You'll probably have to do some formatting because Microsoft takes over and sends it however it thinks it wants to send it. But you can do a big Excel thing. And if you had searched maybe just for type of subcontractors or type or certain vendors, that's all that would be on this Excel spreadsheet also. So let's do some more searching for certain kinds of reports. Maybe I just want an email phone list of all just subcontractors and suppliers. So let's do that, and we want to leave them as active. So let's do a field search. We can see that the status is A, but let's just say we want to do subcontractor, and we can either just slide down and select both of those, or we could do subcontractor, do the control key, and supplier, or whatever you like there. And then we're going to just search for subcontractors and suppliers. Maybe that's for the field, a list for the field of subcontractors and suppliers, and we do a report of that, and we get an email phone list, which is just email addresses and phone numbers for the main contacts that you set up for mobile 1, mobile 2, that kind of thing. And you can see your filter results down here, that it is vendor status A and vendor type subcontractor or supplier. So that's that kind of report, just email addresses. The terms and insurance expire is similar to a report that you'll get if you're over on the vendor expirations list too, but you can see things in red here for where general liability is required, and you put in expiration date so that you could just look at everything. This is just still suppliers and subcontractors. Maybe you just want to look at subcontractors. It's just a basic report of general liability and workers' comp and expirations for those and their payment terms. Some various extraneous information about each one of them that you have set up for them that you might want to look at to see what they might have that you set up, when they're due, and whether they have general liabilities or workers' comp. Now this one I'd like to talk about 1099 and other insurance information. Let's do a field search again. We do want active, but let's clear our search for a second. It'll drop us back in, but let's do field search. And let's say that we just want to look at subcontractors because that's who we think should have a 1099. I'm not going to narrow this down right now because I want to do a search just for subcontractors, which is quite often who you're sending 1099s to, and a report of 1099 and other vendor info. On this report, it helps you to see who you have selected for NEC 1099 and whether or not you have entered a tax ID number for them, and ones that you did not select. And you might want to look at that. You might want to select none and subcontractors and make sure that they are ones that you might want to go put a NEC 1099 on. So you can look for things that are none. These are incorporated, so you have none on those. Barker Roofing, Builder Supply, you might check on that. Maybe they do need to get a 1099. So you can use this. You could narrow it down to none 1099 and subcontractors, and then see if there's any of those you think you should be marking that they should get a 1099. But one thing about it that you can do is also on the ones that you have marked for a 1099. For NEC 1099, you could also say "and for rents" by holding down the control key. Let's clear this search. Let's don't just do subcontractors. Let's do field search. We want an A for active. And let's do anybody that we've marked should get a 1099. So do the first one, and then do your control key for rents, because maybe you have 1099s going out for rents, and do a search. Now let's take a look at the report again for 1099 and other info. And what we should be real concerned about is the ones that we do not have a tax ID number for, that we did set to get 1099s. So let's take a look down here. There's Mike Holland, doesn't have a tax ID number. And if you wanted to look for when he was last paid, and maybe he's needing to be set to inactive like I started out with, who knows, but let's play like he's been paid recently, but we don't have a tax ID number. What you can do is look for Holland by going to the H's and do the upload icon here. You can see that we do not have a W-9 form for this, and like I said, I went over a bunch of this in the very first video, but I can send a request to Holland for his W-9, and I prepare the document request, and what it does is create a comment that you can then send via email to the vendor that is asking them for their IRS W-9 form. You can always make this bigger. You can change the text in here before you send it to Holland, but if you like, but CHS is trying to make it handy for you. And if you're satisfied with this, you can send an email to them. The email they will get will give them these instructions and have a button for them to open our communication portal and upload their W-9. Again, in the very first video in this playlist, I am showing that happening and the vendor returning a general liability certificate to us. But you can do various kinds of requests for documents this way and use those reports, use the search features, do reports, etc. to start trying to help you find things that you need to find. Let's take a look. Let's just take the field search and clear it all out again. Let's go to active again. And let's do reports. Basically though, even though I just asked for active here, this one is not based on search results. It is for active vendors only though, and it's showing you a list of vendors grouped by cost code, ones where you have cost codes attached, and a vendor might show up more than once here because you've attached some different cost codes to them. And you can see that it's by cost code. Like here's 1105 plan costs and architect fees, specs plans, surveys, ATS engineering. You can see how ATS engineering is showing up under more than one cost code here. And if we take a look at ATS engineering, see if it's here near the top of the list. Let's look at their vendor setup. And again, like I said, pay attention to all the tools here. It's asking over here for a default cost code to use to drop in when you're doing vendor bills. Of course, you can change that cost code when you're entering vendor bills to pay, but at least it gives you one to drop in so that you're probably pretty near to the other cost codes for that vendor. But you can click this link right here to assign other cost codes to vendors. See how many other cost codes we've attached to ATS engineering, and you can add a new record and attach another cost code for ATS engineering. That's why it is showing up more than once on that report. The other report about that is all vendors by cost code, ones with cost codes attached. This is active vendors. This one is all vendors, not just the active. It's basically the same report, but you're suddenly going to get all of the vendors there. I thought of one more thing that I'd like to show you about field search. And I'm going to use this, and I should have discussed this when I was talking about how you might have accidentally set up two vendors with two different vendor codes, but they're the same vendor, and you might want to move records from one vendor to another. And I should have mentioned this, that you could have looked for a name of the vendor to see if you're getting a couple of them that had the name. But in this case, I know I noticed something when I looked through the list, and I'm going to just look for things for something called restaurants. And I've given tips before about how you can set up vendors called restaurants or gas or hotels so that you're not setting up vendors for every one of those that you pay. You could just put every restaurant one into something called restaurants. But I want to look at this rest. I'll just put in rest to see what I get. Now notice that I have two vendors set up, one called Restaurants and one called Rest Biz. And I didn't set these up, somebody before me did. So I'm taking a look at the setup, and this one goes to travel expense as the default GL number. So maybe we'd like to call this Restaurants Travel so it's clearer to us about that. And I'll save that and I'll close. And now you see Restaurants Travel. Now you might do RESTTRAV for the vendor code. And again, we'll see how fast we can change a vendor code. And let's do RESTTRAV, maybe like that. So let's resubmit our search. It had to refresh because I changed a vendor code. So there you go, we have Restaurants Biz and Restaurants Travel now, and let's make sure that the Restaurants Biz has some other GL account number, so some reason for why we've set up both of them. And that one we have to entertainment, not to travel. So maybe we do want both of these, Restaurants Business and Restaurants Travel. Or you could change this to Restaurants Entertainment or whatever name that you like to do. But I wanted to show you the feature about how you can type a partial vendor name in the search and find things. Another one that I use quite often is the fact that we are in the Austin area. So we probably have a lot of vendors that start with or have Austin in their name. So I just did the partial, and it's found everything that has the word Austin in its name. Just for your information, because I had not touched on that part of the field search before. So I believe I've gone over everything that I'd like to go over on this vendors list. So I hope all of this helps, and have a great day, and thank you for watching.